Welcome to Don't Be Caged by Your Age, Jeanette Leardi. I'm so happy you're here to share how you are shattering age related expectations, stereotypes, and perspectives with us today. How are you?
I'm doing great, Andy. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak. I'm passionate about this, as you will soon learn.
Listeners, Jeanette is a social gerontologist, community educator, writer, public speaker, aging wellness leader, and author of the just published book, Aging Sideways, Changing Our Perspectives on Getting Older. Oh boy, is this going to be a great conversation for all of us. And during our conversation, you'll learn why Jeanette has a passion for older adult empowerment and find special personal fulfillment helping boomers and older generations identify and share their wisdom with others. That's a beautiful thing, Jeanette.
Thank you. Thank you.
But before we dive into all the good and deliciousness you'll be sharing, let's begin and support the Age Out Loud and Proud movement by having you share your age along with where you are hailing from.
I am 72 years old, proudly 72 years old. I think we should be declaring our age, not just admitting it. And I am in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, can I just say, listeners, how much do I love that? Don't just say your age. Declare it. I
Yes.
love that. 68 over here in Boston. And Jeanette hailing from Portland, Oregon. Thank you so much. And folks, you can find everything you need to know from Jeanette's website, Jeanette, Jeanette, Leardi, Leardi.com. Just want to get that out of the way right up front before we start talking. Jeanette, I need to understand better what is a social gerontologist, and I need to know why and when did you decide to become one?
Well, first, great question to start out with because people, when I say gerontologist, they kind of look at me like, and they think I'm a doctor, which is a
Right.
geriatrician. Geriatricians are doctors that specialize in the care of older adults. A gerontologist, think of it as the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist. Psychiatrists are doctors, psychologists are not. Well, gerontologists are not doctors. What we are is we study aging, the process of aging from birth to death, because we are all aging from the moment we're born. And there are different subcategories of gerontology. You can be an environmental gerontologist that talks about how our environment affects the aging process and our lives, the quality of our lives. So, a social gerontologist, we study how social factors affect our aging, our ability to age. So, by that, I mean our race, our gender, our level of income, or our ethnicity, our level of education, even the geographical location, where you live. Do you live in a rural area or do you live in an urban area? And also the public services that are available to you. All of that affects how well we age. So that's what I study.
Oh my gosh. And when? When did this become like I am compelled to do this? Did it start right after you earned a degree or did you gradually fall into this?
First, I have a master's in English, and I've been a teacher of writing and journaling and all kinds of literary things for years. And actually, I started out as a writer of children's educational materials, which I still do. I still write for children. But when I was in my late 40s and early 50s, I became a full time caregiver to both my parents for a decade. That totally changed my life. It was such an impactful event for me.
How old were you,
What
Jeanette?
I was in my late 40s. I was about probably 47 or
Yeah.
so. And for about 10 years. And I was trying to get them what is now called considered person centered care. That is getting them the care that they want and that they needed, that's tailored to them as individuals. And so much care in our healthcare system is tailored to the system and not to the person themselves. So I was absolutely astonished and dismayed by how hard it was for them to get the care that they deserved.
Right.
And so after they both passed away, I was haunted by this spectrum of why do we get aging so wrong? So I went back to graduate school and I got a graduate certificate in gerontology at the age of 57.
See,
So I went back to school.
I love this something fierce. The founder of Spanx shared a great post yesterday on LinkedIn about it's never too late. And she talked about, or you're never too old. She talked about how many people just like you in their late 50s went back
Hmm.
to schools, and of course, early 60s. And
Right.
folks,
And
if you
even later.
remember, yeah, episode 2, we had a great conversation with Mildred, who went back and got her master's at the age of 68. And it is so important to have that representation, to know that here you are, 15 years later, and you're doing something that is so meaningful and so rich and so fulfilling to you, Jeanette. I
Thank you.
love this.
What you keep in mind is that we can learn things at all ages, and our brains actually change so that we have other kinds of learning skills that we didn't have in our 30s. So when I was in graduate school among people who were in their late 20s, we learned from each other, and I taught them a few things too. I learned from them, and they taught me, and I taught them some stuff too.
Can
So
you expand a little bit on that? How the
sure.
brain is performing differently at this age?
Absolutely. I give all kinds of presentations on this, but brains change. Our brains are plastic. And so they constantly grow connections between the brain cells in our brain. We have 100 billion brain cells in our brains. But the longer we live, the more we experience, the more connections between those brain cells we form. So we can have trillions more connections in our brains when we're in our 60s and 70s than we had when we were in our 30s. And so we our brains adjust, and we do lose some capacities as we get older. We're not as fast. Our reflexes are not as fast. And we may have some problems with short-term memory and distraction. But the flip side of that is our brains mature to the point where we're able to use both hemispheres of our brain simultaneously better. And that's because when we're born, our hemispheres don't touch except for a bridge of tissue in the
Right.
middle of our corpus callosum. And we're born with that little fragile bridge of tissue. But as we get older and older, that bridge gets thicker and thicker until it matures when we're in our 50s. It doesn't mature until we're in our 50s. And that's when we're able to use both hemispheres simultaneously better. And what does that mean? As we get older, we're better at problem solving from different perspectives. We can see we can put ourselves in the place of other people more easily than when we were younger. So that's just one of the skills we develop as we get older. We're also better able to decide what piece of information is relevant and what's irrelevant when doing a task. We know the shortcuts. We've created the shortcuts. So we can say, hey, you don't have to do all of this. You can go right from A to D. You have to go through B and C. So that's
Right.
another skill that we develop.
And I love that because you and I had a little back and forth on a post that I shared on the Don't Be Caged by Your Age LinkedIn page regarding aging. And we were talking about how employers were sidebarring people. You turn off, you go into retirement when what an ideal age to have them on board. Maybe not for the 40-hour week, right?
Well, and there's scientific studies have been shown that intergenerational work teams are the most productive. You need old brains and young brains working together in the workplace because the young brains can come up with these, hey, let's do this, let's do that. The older brains are good at quality control and can say, that's a good idea, but we may have to watch out for this situation happening. So you need both brains in the workplace, and that's what managers really need to understand, and what older people who apply for jobs need to understand. And when they apply for a job, to not see themselves as kind of less than, but to say, hey, I'm bringing some skills that you have no idea how well I can benefit your company if you hire me. That's the position we need to be in as older adults.
I love that something fierce. Thank you, Jeanette, for that inspirational moment. On a personal note, I would just like to know about how is it that I sometimes have a hard time retrieving words, and
Mhm.
they might come to me an hour or two later. I mean, they're not gone forever.
Right, right. Well, that again is because of the fact that we have a lot more stuff in our heads throughout for our years of experience. Here's how I like to explain the older and the younger brain. Imagine our brains as libraries, okay? And a healthy 35-year-old brain, let's say, has a library of all experiences, everything that person knows, a library of about 100,000 books. You ask that 35-year-old brain, go find me War and Peace, or go find me Huckleberry Finn. Well, that brain's going to go right to the shelf, pull the book down, say, here you are, here's War and Peace, or here's Huckleberry Finn. You get a 75-year-old brain, and it's got to be a healthy brain, so it's important to keep our brains healthy. You get a healthy 75-year-old brain, and you say, go find me War and Peace, or go find me Huckleberry Finn. But that brain doesn't have 100,000 books. That brain has 100 million books. And so the library has gotten has expanded. Floors have been built onto it. The aisles are longer, many more shelves. So it's going to take us a little while to find that book. Oh, is it in the basement? Or no, I think it's in the next room. So it takes us longer, and it may take us a longer time to find that word, but because we have so much in our heads. But the advantage of the older brain, there are two advantages. One, chances are we've learned that word throughout our lives, or chances are we've read that book, we've gotten to Huckleberry Finn. And the other advantage is the older brain, with its ability to see things from different perspectives, can say, hey, and if you like Huckleberry Finn, I got 5 other books I can recommend you're going to like. So
See, this,
it,
you know what this does,
what?
Jeanette?
Mm,
You are helping people shift the shame and blame, right? That
yes.
comes and that we feel like, I can't remember that word. Okay, is it early Alzheimer's? Do I have
Mhm.
dementia, memory loss? Oh my gosh. And other people look at you like, instead of going, hold on, she's got to retrieve that from her
Right,
Jillian book library of
right,
information, that big, beautiful brain now, because this brain is now 72 or 68 or whatever age old. And it's stored a lot of information and lived experiences. So, excuse me. And you know what I do with a lot of folks? Because sometimes I meet folks all the time and I go, would you refresh my browser for me?
right. Love it, love it, totally love it.
Because,
Absolutely.
like, come on, I've got so much in here. When
Exactly, exactly. You have so much in there, yeah. So,
so I
that
think that brings a little humor to it instead of
yes,
feeling like, oh, um,
yes.
I
And you
also
by the way, you know when we start to forget things? When we're in our late 20s. So, when they talk about senior moments, no, I mean, younger kids have moments too, so let's just call them moments, that's
they're
all.
just moments.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love this. And frankly, Jeanette, you need to go. The Maria Shriver people need to find you because she's got this whole thing on radically reframing aging.
great, great.
We've got to get you on her Sunday show or whatever she's doing because you are ideal. Just putting that
Thank
out
you,
there, listeners. If you have any connections, make sure you connect Jeanette with Maria Shriver, and we'll just hold that intention because this is so important on
thank
the
you.
radically reframing how we view in our culture aging. Because now, listening to Jeanette, I'm thinking, my gosh, life doesn't really get really juicy and vibrant until you're in your 50s when that thin layer becomes a whole hemisphere. My gosh, people should be pounding down the doors here for us to have us involved in their lives. And that leads me to the fact that we have seen a significant increase in folks talking about ageism.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and this pro age movement is so exciting. And of course, I'm all about the age out loud. And now we know it's going to be in declare your age
right.
moving forward. It's still, though, given the firm hold American society has on its youth based culture,
Mhm.
combined with your social gerontologist background, Jeanette, what are your thoughts about the pro age movement? Do we actually have a chance of flipping the script?
We do. I think we're at a tipping point. We're getting to a tipping point. Here's the reality that people need to understand. The world is getting older. People are living longer. There're going to be more older people on this planet than ever before. As a matter of fact, right now there are more people over the age of 65 than under the age of 5. When in human history did we ever have more older people than younger people? Never. And it's because of all the progress especially in the 20th century with uh, antibiotics and vaccines and um, public health, sanitation, refrigeration, all kinds of different developments that have enabled us to live longer. Did you know that in 1900 in the United States, the average life expectancy was 47? And now our life expectancy could be in our 80s, the average life expectancy at birth. And it's going to be more common that we're going to have more people into our hundreds. A child born in the United States today is a 50-50 chance of being 100 years old. So we're going to have a planet of older and older people. So we have this amazing stockpile of human capital
That's
that
great.
we need to be using. And that's so I think we're at a tipping point. Of course, any civil rights movement takes decades. I mean, women and minorities, and
Oh my gosh.
it's still
That's a
going
whole
on.
separate conversation,
Right,
Jeanette. But
right,
what you're trying to do, which is so important, is we don't want to waste our generations of talent,
right,
wisdom,
right,
and contribution to society. I
right.
just shared a reel, listeners, on the Instagram and TikTok, YouTube shorts with a woman being interviewed, Ruby, 95 years old, still a substitute teacher. I mean, she's
Mm.
just a phenomenal example of showing up every day to work, loves it, wouldn't want to trade it for anything, but substitute teacher, right? She doesn't have the full responsibility of a teacher. She
Mhm.
comes in, she gets to add value, stay in touch with younger generations. How about that, Jeanette?
Well, and here's the important thing too. Having children as young as age 3 can begin to pick up ageism, can begin to start having negative feelings about being old.
Right.
They can pick that up from their parents. They can pick that up from TV shows that make fun of old people, all the jokes about old age, the fairy tales, the Wicked Witch and the Evil King and all of that stuff.
Or how they infantilize older people.
Or
Oh,
how they
honey.
infantilize old people. Right, exactly. So children as young as 3. So Ruby, still in touch with these younger people, she is a wonderful role model that might help them bust their stereotypes about old people because now they know an old person who's really able to do this amazing job. They like Ruby, she's really with it in terms of helping them. So that's how we're going to defeat ageism is intergenerational relationships. It's very important to make friends with people significantly older and significantly younger than you. That's what ultimately is going
It
to change this.
110%. As a startup founder mentor for 8 years, I met a lot of young folks, Jeanette. And I read into one recently at a podcast event, and he did a post and it was called, "Is Andy Lyons really Andy or is she AI?" And it was this wonderful conversation. He's 28. And it was
Ah,
a wonderful conversation. Like, how could this person be this way in person? You sure she's not AI and why it isn't? And oh God, at first I was so honored, but I howled. and it was just lovely to be showcased, right? By somebody I could be their grandmother. Let's talk about your amazing book that you've written. And folks, this is a phenomenal new book that Jeanette has brought, Aging Sideways, Changing Our Perspectives on Getting Older. We've been talking about this the whole time. And as a writer, a keen observer, and a data gatherer, which I just love about you in the gerontology space, so you've been observing keenly for a while. What compelled you to put it to words? To write Aging Sideways. And then, of course, I'm going to want to know what that title means because I think the biggest decision and hardest decision you make as an author is the title.
yep.
So please share that with us.
Sure. Well, I've been blogging about aging for about 10 years. So I have a lot of blog posts. So this book is a compendium of my blog posts plus original essays, plus other writings I've done in other venues. And the reason why I decided to put together in a book is because I want to reach the masses in such a way to convince people that let's stop seeing aging in very narrow ways. We tend to wear side blinders about aging. We are so indoctrinated to see aging as nothing but deterioration and decline that we move ahead with these blinders on, and then we start to worry. Well, if this is what's inevitably going to happen to me, I don't want to do it. I'm going to resist getting older. I'm going to stay as young as possible for as long as possible. So I'd want to take away those blinders and have people just kind of look a little bit differently at aging. And I present some surprising, kind of quirky, goofy ways of looking at aging that people haven't thought of yet. And I can get into that in a
Yeah,
little
but
bit.
but but why? So you're calling it sideways so that we look around the landscape. We go into our peripheral vision.
Well, here's how I got the title. You asked how I got the title. There's a book written by an art teacher named Betty Edwards, a book that she published decades ago called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain.
Yes, I did
And
that
she
book.
has this wonderful exercise called upside down drawing. If you take let's say, a photograph of a chair, and you ask somebody to copy that photograph, they'll draw a chair, sort of ish. They'll try and do that. But she found that if you turn the photograph of the chair upside down and you ask people to copy it, the part of their brain that has all these preconceived notions of chairs and that kind of editorializes and analyzes, that's kind of put to the side. And what they're actually seeing are the actual lines of the chair and the relationship between the lines and the spaces. And so when they draw the upside down chair and then they turn the drawing right side up, that chair is far more accurate than the chair that they did just looking at the photo. So I thought, well, I don't want to turn people's brains entirely upside down about aging, but let's just tilt them to the side. Let's just kind of look at aging, not in the direct way we think we know about aging, but in a sideways, well, could there be something else to this picture that I'm missing? And that's why I call it aging sideways, cocking
I
your head a little bit to the side.
I love it. And folks, we're chatting with gerontologist, social gerontologist Jeanette Leardi, and we're talking about her new book that just came out, Aging Sideways, Changing Our Perspectives on Getting Older. And you can learn more, of course, by going to Jeanette's website, JeanetteLeardi.com. And I'll have the links in all the show notes. Let's take a minute because in your introduction epilogue, you present and revisit four strategies for aging more positively and productively. And we've been going over some of those in our earlier conversation. You know, let's review some of those now because I'm always saying, can someone give me a script, please, so I can respond to a certain bias? And in this case, it would be ageism biases. And it's like you've answered the call for that, so that, share the importance of us asking right side up questions whenever we're confronted with situation of age bias and all of these wonderful things that will help us be proactive and better representations of the aging population.
Sure. So I propose four strategies or four skills that we can develop in order to age productively and to be aware of age discrimination and ageism and what to do about it. So first of all, one strategy is sidestepping a deeply embedded obstacle that you're approaching rather than retreating from it or futilely trying to remove it. Just sidestep it. So here's an example. I'm asking people to be flexible and resilient when encountering the challenges of older age. So you can decide, and we've talked about this, that admitting to and maybe even declaring that reaching elderhood is a good thing. You know, don't fight aging by trying to stay young or calling yourself young at heart. That phrase kind of just bothers me when I hear it. We're not young at heart. We're old at heart. And there's some really good old heart reasons to be old at heart. So there's power in calling ourselves old. Oh, now I began
Can
to
I,
call.
Jeanette, I just have to stop you there for a second. This is so important for everybody to take in because what you're doing is also radically reframing the word old.
Yes,
And I've talked about this. Like we have antiques that we revere in our home,
right.
right? Well, yeah, because of the meaning and the richness of everything about that.
Right, right.
And
We've grown up in a culture that is disposable, and so we value anything young and new and improved over old and traditional and well worn and well experienced. So that's where we get that prejudice from.
so I know I interrupted you. You were sharing your four, premises, and one of them was about, old at heart and
Right,
aging and
right.
understanding that old is okay.
Yeah, old is okay. Now it's a stretch for people to start to admit that they're old. So start to admit that you're an older adult. Call yourself an older adult. I'm an older adult. And I've earned it. We talk about the word senior, I'd like to reclaim. I know that people bristle at the idea of senior centers and senior this and senior that. But think about it this way: being a senior in high school is the coolest thing to be, isn't it? It's cooler than being a junior or a sophomore or freshman.
Absolutely.
Same thing with college. Being a senior vice president of a company means you're above the other vice presidents. So why don't we just say, I'm a senior vice president of life? I've gotten to that point. Anyway, that's just a side thing. But so so just sidestepping an obstacle. The obstacle is aging, or the dread of aging.
Right.
Sidestep it and just embrace it. Say, okay, I'm old. Cool. And that's fine with me. So that's one strategy. Another strategy is redefining a term or a concept in a way that makes its meaning more accurate and more relevant to you. I think we've all heard the phrase silver tsunami. I'm a baby boomer. And so it's applied to us baby boomers. There's so many of us. By the way, there are more millennials than boomers at this point. Millennials are a bigger generation than the boomers. But anyway, so many of us boomers that we're going to wipe out the resources of our country. We're using up Social Security and Medicare, and there's nothing
And we're
that we
holding on to our homes for too long.
holding on, staying in our jobs for too long. Well, get out of the way and make room for the younger people. By the way, that's called the fallacy of the lump of labor, as if there's not enough jobs to go around. Again, If you have older people and younger people in the workplace, they're far more productive, the company expands, and they hire more people. So you need to keep the older people in the workplace too. But anyway, so the silver tsunami, I say I don't like that term. I'm going to call us a silver reservoir. We're silver reservoirs. We have all these gifts, all these talents that are being pent up and held behind this wall. What if we opened up the floodgates and let all of our talents and experiences and wisdom out into the culture and not to be put aside? A lot of us older people are put aside. We're marginalized. People don't think our opinions are worth it.
We're
What if
warehoused.
yeah, we're warehouse. What if you let us do our thing and see what happens? We'll not be worried about being a society of scarcity. We'll be a society of abundance. That's going to be the reality, and we need to wake up to that fact. So that's a second strategy. A third strategy is looking peripherally as you move forward rather than only straight ahead or in the rearview mirror. So having the willingness and the imagination to think outside the box and find other ways to perceive things and to act. So an example of that is the phrase over the hill. You see these birthday cards, over the hill cards, and you're getting old and it's a kind of a joke and ha ha ha. You're becoming useless. Let's perceive the concept of climbing a hill. What does it take to climb a hill? You need discipline, you need strength, you need determination. You may need some experience and skill having climbed other hills before. So this is how I explain it. We older people are not over the hill. We're just at the top of a particular hill. And when we're at the top of that hill, we get to see in the distance other hills yet to climb that we didn't even know were there when we were at the bottom of the hill before we climbed it. So we climb, get to the top of this hill, and there's another hill yet to climb. We have more to do. This doesn't stop for us. That's how I like to see the hill analogy. So
I
let's
I
just
love
pick
that something fierce too,
one.
Jeanette, because it helps in the whole perspective of why you want the intergenerational relationships happening, especially in the
Right.
workforce, because you've got someone who's already hiked all these hills. If
Right.
you're hiking Mount Everest for the first time, you're going to talk to people who've been up that peak several times.
Right, right, exactly. I've got the tips, I've got the equipment. Here's the equipment you need.
Here's what I've
That's
learned from different weather conditions,
exactly,
all of
exactly.
that.
You see how rich that metaphor is
Yes.
when you really think about it and how it can really inform how we talk about aging. So it's very
I'm
hopeful.
gonna be quoting you so much going forward. I'm just gonna put all my Jeanette Leardi quotes into a thing here.
Spread the word. That's what I'm about, spreading the word. When I give presentations, I say, "You're now my ambassadors. You go out and you talk about this stuff to other people because that's what's gonna help us get rid of ageism." So, and that fourth strategy is being open to the unexpected rather than controlling what you encounter in the moment. So let's reject this zero-sum myth of one-sided loss. We don't lose everything as we get older. In fact, as I said before, we start to gain some things as we get older. So let's take stock of our talents and our interests and our passions and embrace the ways in which we can put them to greater use. And by knowing those assets that we have, we can be confident that we can deal with the unexpected. Been there, done that. I've had these problems. Now I know how to get through them. I can survive this next one. And that's another thing that happens to us as we get older. We tend to be more hopeful when we hit points of adversity. We say, we've got a history of surviving. I can survive this. Believe it or not, older adults have been better able mentally to survive COVID than younger people. The
That's right.
overwhelming number of deaths have happened to older people, but yet psychologically, we've been handling it better than younger people have because
This
we've
is
been through other stuff before.
this is so true. And I've seen witnessed this with my husband he's 73. Over the last 10 years, listeners, when things happen to us, we'd be like, yeah, that's all gonna work out. Because it's worked out before. We may not know how it's gonna work out, but we know we'll figure it out. Nobody can take away from you what's between your ears and in your heart. All right. And those experiences, when you've gotten on the other side of some really bad times, the first times those bad times hit you, it's overwhelming and can be a little, you have trauma involved with it, of course.
Mm.
But now and you know it works out. I love that, Jeanette. Thank you for highlighting that as
Sure,
number four.
sure. And actually, our brains do change to allow us to regulate our emotions better. We don't take the bad stuff as drastically as we used to, and our brains have physiologically changed to do that.
And I think we see more humor in a
Yes.
situation.
Hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully. Of course, there's another stereotype, the cranky older person, right?
You know what? I Do you know cranky children? I've known cranky children, cranky teenagers, and cranky middle-aged people. So being cranky is not the be all and end all of older people. And maybe if we're cranky, could it be because we're constantly demeaned and marginalized and
Oh
put
my gosh.
aside, and maybe we're tired of this stuff. So,
Jeanette, I just saw it at the doctor's the other day and I called them on it. But a lot of times when they see you and your age, they're going to assume A, retired, B, why bother?
mm,
And, and,
that's
and I
right.
just like to keep everybody tuned in and turned on as to how they're going to be taking care of me as if I
Mm,
were a 30-year-old for crying out loud.
mm,
But the thing I'm worried about, talk about cranky, is when someone infantilizes me.
yeah.
I almost don't I don't yeah, my hand comes up and I don't make me bitch slap you, honey. I've lived I need a better response is what I'm saying. I need a script for how to respond with that
Well,
being treated
that
that way.
That infantilizing is called elder speak. How did people speak to us? Sometimes it's with the sing-songy, sweetie, oh, honey kind of thing, or they talk very slowly or very loudly, assuming that we're all deaf. You know, unless a person says, "Could you speak louder?" Don't assume that we all are deaf. Just speak to us as you would speak to anybody else. So that's called elder speak. And there are ways of handling that. I prefer to handle that with humor. I'm at a checkout counter in the supermarket, let's say, and the younger person who's the cashier says, "Have you found everything you wanted today, young lady?" And I'll say, "Do you have eye problems? I'm sorry. I'm not a young lady, and I'm okay. I'm an old lady, and I'm okay with that. And guess what? You can be okay with it too."
Yeah.
So there's a way of, doing it lightly. Or, if somebody, if an attendant in a nursing home says, "Have we had our bath today?" I would say, "I've had mine. Have you had yours?" You
It's
know,
Thank
there's
you.
some comeback.
And that sings that elder speak thing, I just wanna say, are you okay? Have you, like, reverted back a couple of decades? I'm trying to understand why you're talking like that.
Well,
Um,
and you could
that's a
say,
little harsh though, I'm sure.
yeah, well, if they call you honey or whatever, and I say, "You know what? I prefer to be called Jeanette. You can call me Jeanette as
Thank you,
opposed
and
to
I'm gonna have to write these down and put them on cue cards and take them with
I
me.
mean, we know that they're trying to be nice and they're trying to be, and you can acknowledge that. You say, "Thank you for, I know you're trying to be nice. But I really prefer to be called by my name."
And you know what you reminded me of, Jeanette, and I wanna get someone on the show who specializes in hearing aids,
Mm.
because a lot of folks who are aging are embarrassed to wear and my god, we've got these friggin' tiny, super, like, Star Trek hearing aids nowadays, so it's really not that bad, but people are still ashamed to wear them when we need them. Our ears I mean, my gosh, just this sex, drugs, and rock and roll from the '70s, loud music. Of course, our hearing is not so great.
Well, and that's the intersection of ageism and ableism. We are all, we don't want to appear disabled in any way. And that's a whole nother prejudice that often gets associated with ageism as well. I mean, look in our society, somebody who's in a wheelchair, we may pity them. What talents do that have? Stephen Hawking, look at his brain. I
Brilliant, yeah,
mean, come on, so
and
we,
that's why on the show and folks, you may remember the episodes when we had, Sally, who has a phenomenal resume company, service, and she's 72, and she is a gamer, and Jeanette, I was so bad. When she said she was a gamer, I said, "What, bingo?" I was like, "No idea. I've been gaming since we had to do punch cards with mainframes." It was almost like, "I'm so sorry." But she is thriving in her 70s, right? And same with Julie Dennis, that everybody may recall the private investigator I talked to. She can do so much work from her desk, right?
imagine how
There's
much more she can do if society, or people with disabilities can do, if society would just we would open ourselves up to that.
right.
But it's a lot of times society blocks people from doing what they can do.
Well, I love what you're doing. First of all, your work, your blogs, your writing, your speaking, it is just so wonderful to be able to turn to you and go, well, what would Jeanette say? Over something. I just love that you are a resource for all of us. I want everybody to go to JeanetteLeardi.com, sign up for everything. Know that she is there as your go to goddess and be sure to buy her book, Aging Sideways, Changing Our Perspectives on Getting Older. Plus, Jeanette, you've reaffirmed my own mission and why for Don't Be Caged by Your Age as a way to represent, right? To provide representation so people see it, they can be it. They're hearing you, they're seeing you and all this great information. They're seeing the other guests that we're interviewing here
Right.
as examples while also getting the resources because. As you and I both know, the World Health Organization is called retirement and epidemic, costing societies billions. We need to be part of the landscape that is changing this for the resources and the folks and the trains and everything that's changing the perspective of aging. You've given us so many great words from, silver reservoir to just so many great things here. I also see you as a historian,
Oh,
like Heather Cox Richardson is documenting everything right now for the political history. I really feel that you are also adding value as an historian for this very important and pivotal time in our
thank you.
society.
Thank you.
Any last words for folks to help them remember not to be caged by their age before we wrap up our delicious conversation?
Sure. And I love that phrase, being caged by your age, because society can put us in cages, but we can also put ourselves in cages to say,
That's right.
I don't know, I'm too old to do this, or I can't really learn this at my age. Let's stop doing that. Okay. So here are a couple of pieces of advice. Share your stories, your talents, and your time with others. I would bet anyone listening to you right now, listening to us, would know something that somebody else would like to know. Find out who that person is and share it, and then learn from that other person what they know. The whole exchange. And again, if it's intergenerational, the better, all the better. Here's another thing. Think yes and. In improvisational comedy, if you've ever seen improvisational comedy, you give someone, kind of a strange premise. You're on a desert island and all of a sudden you see a coconut tree or whatever. They take that premise and they go with it. They add to it. So very often we're so familiar with what our yeses are, our givens in our life. Oh, I'm losing my eyesight and everything. Yeah, that's a yes, but what's your and? What can you add to that? Okay, I'm losing my eyesight and I love to read, so I'm going to find other ways. I'm going to take out audiobooks or whatever. So do yes and. What is your and? Ask what it is that you've got that you can contribute to others. And finally, see yourself as a complete human being who happens to be aging rather than as a person whose identity is consumed by the fact that you're getting older. Don't let getting older be the dread of getting older drive you to affect your life and how you live in it. You are a person, everybody's getting older. This is the thing, anybody's prejudice against old people's prejudice against their future self, because with any luck, those people are going to be old one day. So let's all solve this problem so that our kids and grandkids don't have to deal with it. Let's solve it now. So those would be my ideas.
Bravo. I got the clappers out, listeners and viewers. Big time. I'm a huge fan of ageism as a prejudice against your future self. So knock that off.
Right.
Stop. Oh, Jeanette, I am so grateful that you joined me for this
It's
conversation. I am going to
fun.
be listening to this one a dozen times at least for my own wealth and benefits so I can be a better ambassador for you and your wonderful work in the world, but also for the aging population so they can embrace their whole humanness that happens to be aging, right?
Right. Right. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. This has
Oh,
been
it's
such a pleasure.
so wonderful. Listeners, what are your thoughts? What are your ideas? I know you have a few. Please share them on the IG feed when I share the reels and the episode here, or hop on the website or on the LinkedIn page. I'd love to know your thoughts. And be sure to go out and grab a copy of Jeanette's book, Aging Sideways, Changing Our Perspectives on Getting Older. From this conversation, it will absolutely benefit you. And I thank you, listeners, too, for helping us crush and dissolve ageism. So be sure to sign up for a newsletter at don'tbecagedbyyourage.com. And that way you'll get my monthly recap of all our delicious conversations here on the podcast, along with a list of resources, which you can also find on the website at don'tbecagedbyyourage.com. And finally, listeners, please, please, please remember As Jeanette has shared throughout this conversation, you have so much to give. So don't let those internalized ageist beliefs prevent you and limit you from pursuing new dreams and opportunities no matter what your body's going through. You have something to offer us until your last breath, and we need you and we want you. Right, Jeanette?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you, Jeanette, for joining me. And until next time, everyone, I'm wishing you a delicious day everywhere you glow. Cheers from Boston and from Portland. Listeners, I'm so grateful you carved out time to tune in and grab the gems from this delicious conversation. Be sure to hop on over to Don't Be Caged by Your Age on LinkedIn or Instagram to share your thoughts about ageism and unretirement. Because in this space, your age doesn't define you, it refines you. If you are inspired by a story you hear, it would mean the world to me if you would subscribe, share, rate, and review the podcast. To receive an alert whenever a new show is posted, please join the Don't Be Caged by Your Age newsletter. Every month, you'll receive links to the podcast and helpful resources for creating possibilities for your unretirement days. Thank you for tuning in. I am so excited to hear how you found ways to thrive after 65. Waving from Boston, cheers.